What if your nightmares were not dreams at all, but memories, fragments of a prison you helped build without ever knowing? Imagine lying in your bed, convinced you are safe, it's only to wake inside a copy of your own room, its walls stretching into endless corridors, its lights flickering like broken stars. You stumble forward, only to realize you are still asleep, trapped in a loop of false awakenings, each one sealing you deeper into a labyrinth that feels designed to feed on fear itself. This is no heaven, no hell of fire and brimstone, is an astral hell, a world made not by gods but by us, brick by brick, out of centuries of pain, despair, and unresolved wounds. Across cultures, whispers of this place appear. The Duat of Egypt, the Naraka of Hindu myth, the Tibetan Bardo, Dante's Inferno. Each speaks of corridors, shadows, distorted guides who are not what they seem. But what if these were not myths of afterlife punishments, but blueprints of an architecture we slip into every night when our spirits drift into the astral? What if the entities that press on your chest during sleep paralysis, the shadows that lean over your bed, are not hallucinations, but collectors feeding on the vibration of fear as if it were blood? The forbidden truth is terrifying. This hell is not imposed upon us by higher powers. It is built from us, sustained by our own despair, and ritualized through every nightmare. The question is not whether astral hell exists, is whether you are already inside it. Right now, every time you close your eyes, architecture is never neutral. A temple directs devotion. A prison arranges despair. An astral hell is the most intricate architecture of all, built not of stone or steel, but of human anguish layered across centuries. It does not rise from divine decree, nor from the malice of demons alone, emerges from us. A collective landfill of unresolved sorrow, a self-constructed labyrinth where suffering is mortar and fear the blueprint. To enter it is to walk through a city erected from pain. Picture the corridors first. They stretch without end, each hallway resembling places you know but twisted. Your childhood home, your school, your hospital. Walls bleed into one another. Stairs climb but never arrive. Doors open only to loop back into the same room. This design is deliberate, mimics familiarity to disarm, then mutates it to disorient. The architecture feeds on recognition distorted into terror. The more you wander, the more you recognize, and the deeper the prison grips you. In every tradition, echoes of this structure remain. The Egyptians spoke of the Duat, a vast labyrinth through which the soul wandered, beset by guardians demanding passwords. The Tibetans described the Bardo, a shifting corridor between lives, filled with visions that terrified the unprepared. Dante painted the Inferno as descending circles, each one both punishment and structure. None of these were random. Each mapped a version of the astral architecture spaces where geometry itself is weapon, where the design enforces despair. The construction materials are not stone, but resonance. Every trauma, every scream left unresolved. Every war's echo, every genocide's grief adds another wing to the structure. Astral Hell is a city built from psychic debris. Imagine millions of rooms stitched from nightmares, billions of bricks pressed from grief. We build its walls nightly as our pain leaks into the astral. An entities opportunistic and ancient. Gather there not as architects, but as scavengers, inhabiting what humanity unknowingly creates. They do not need to design. We do it for them. They only need to harvest. Consider the loops of false awakening. You open your eyes convinced you are free, only to find yourself still in the same room, the same shadows waiting. This is not glitch, but design. The architecture of Astral Hell thrives on recursion, trapping you in cycles where hope itself becomes the bait. Every awakening is another corridor disguised as exit, a ritualized trick that teaches despair. The more you resist, the deeper you sink, because resistance energizes the very structure. It is a system calibrated to transmute your longing for freedom into further captivity. The geometry is alive. Lights flicker not from faulty bulbs, but from intention. They stutter like breath, mimicking life to unsettle. Shadows fall where no object stands. Distance stretches unnaturally, hallways elongating as you walk. This is architecture as predator, using space itself as a weapon. You do not need guards or chains when the room itself shifts to keep you inside. And at the heart of this design lies inversion, a bed, symbol of rest, becomes a coffin. Home, symbol of safety, becomes a trap. Familiar face, symbol of comfort, becomes an imposter. Every structural element flips its meaning, ensuring that trust itself is violated. Architecture here is not neutral container, but active liar. The great secret is that this architecture is collective, is not your private hell, but our shared one. Each of us contributes bricks every time we drown in despair without resolution, every time trauma festers unhealed, every time hatred multiplies. Astral hell is not beneath us, it is around us, layered in unseen dimensions. We inhabit it when we sleep, glimpse it when we dream, feel its corridors pressing in during paralysis. It is not elsewhere, it is here, superimposed, waiting for resonance to pull us in. And unlike mythic hells, it requires no divine warden. Its architecture is self-sustaining. The more we suffer, the stronger its walls grow. Good, the more we fear, the deeper its corridors twist. The system is autopilot. The demiurge need not enforce it. Humanity itself maintains it, unaware. The structure persists because we keep building it night after night. The forbidden truth is this: astral hell is not a punishment delivered from on high. It is a prison humanity constructs for itself, a monument to unhealed wounds. Its architecture is perfect because it was built from what we know best, our own pain. And like all architecture, once you recognize its design, you can begin to navigate it. The question is whether recognition will be enough, or whether the corridors have grown so vast that even awareness cannot find the way out. Every prison speaks through symbols, and astral hell is no different. Its walls are etched with glyphs of despair, not carved in stone, but projected into perception itself. To walk its corridors is to step into a lexicon of fear. Each image a sigil designed to bind, each distortion a rune reinforcing captivity. The language of astral hell is not written in ink but in hallucination, not on parchment, but on the fabric of reality itself. The most persistent symbol is the corridor. In every culture, the hallway signifies passage, transition, movement toward a destination. But in astral hell, corridors never end. They stretch infinitely, folding back on themselves, sometimes narrowing until you cannot breathe, sometimes widening into caverns that echo with your own footsteps. This is not architecture alone, it is a symbol of futility, the endless chase after exits that do not exist. The corridor itself is a sigil of despair, a glyph reminding the soul that no matter how far it walks, it is already trapped. Then comes the false awakening, one of the most insidious symbols. To awaken should mean liberation, clarity, return to the body. But in astral hell, awakening is counterfeit, a dream within a dream, each one tricking you deeper into the labyrinth. These loops are contracts disguised as dawn, symbols of betrayal that invert the meaning of waking. The false awakening is a glyph of consent you never gave each time. You accept the dream as a reality. You reinforce the pact. It is a living sigil, binding you through repetition. The shadow figure is another recurring symbol. Tall, silent, faceless, often pressing on your chest in paralysis. It is the embodiment of weight, of suppression. Across cultures, the same archetype emerges. The Egyptian Aku, the medieval incubus, the modern sleep demon. Its symbol is consistent. The reminder that your breath, your very life force, is currency. The shadow does not kill, it harvests fear, marking you as participant in the astral economy. Its facelessness is not absence, but language. It is every oppressor and no one at once. Distorted faces populate astral hell as well. You may see your family, but their eyes are wrong. You may meet a friend, but their smile does not belong to them. These faces are symbols of inversion icons corrupted. The sacred image of recognition becomes parody, forcing you to doubt sight itself. The symbol here is clear: trust nothing, for even the most intimate bonds are counterfeit. This corruption of the face echoes through media as well. Glitching screens, uncanny smiles, static-filled portraits. They are all sigils of the same truth, that identity is unstable, perception is a trap. Even light becomes symbolic. In astral hell, lamps flicker, bulbs hum, neon glows cold instead of warm. Light, normally the archetype of guidance, becomes unreliable. Each flicker is a glyph of uncertainty, each stutter a reminder that illumination here is counterfeit. The language is inversion once more. Light does not reveal, it deceives. This is why so many nightmares occur under buzzing fluorescent glow, is light stripped of divinity. A hollow symbol weaponized against the soul. The architecture itself becomes alphabet. Stairs that lead nowhere are runes of hopeless striving. Locked doors are glyphs of futility. Windows looking out onto void are sigils of unreachable freedom. Each structural distortion is not random, but scripted. A language written into space. Astral Hell is a library where geometry is the text, and the message is always despair. Our waking world mirrors this symbolic grammar. Endless cubicles replicate corridors of futility. False news cycles are false awakenings. Each headline, another counterfeit dawn. Advertising creates distorted faces, promising comfort but offering betrayal. Fluorescent lit offices mimic the buzzing neon of astral traps. The same language permeates both worlds, because astral hell is not separate from us. It is the shadow grammar of our collective reality, but symbols, once recognized, can be broken. To see the corridor as sigil of futility is to refuse to walk endlessly. To recognize the false awakening as glyph of consent is to withhold acceptance. To meet the shadow figure not with fear, but with awareness, is to starve it of currency. The forbidden texts always taught this. Symbols enslave only as long as they remain unread. Once you know their grammar, you can rewrite their meaning. The forbidden truth is this. Astral hell is not only architecture but language, a lexicon of despair inscribed in endless corridors, false awakenings, distorted faces, flickering lights. It is a scripture written by suffering itself. But like all scripture, it can be reinterpreted. And when you begin to read the symbols not as commands, but as evidence, the prison begins to crack. For every symbol that enslaves is also testimony, whispering the hidden truth of the system that created it. Blood has always been the oldest currency, the price paid in every sacrifice, war, or altar. Yet in astral hell, blood is not only physicalite, is vibrational, emotional, psychic. The entities that haunt those flickering corridors do not need veins to cut or bodies to mutilate. They feed instead on the distilled essence of our despair. In this inverted economy, terror is blood, grief is blood, guilt is blood, and every night we bleed, willingly or not, into the labyrinth we have built. Think of the shadow pressing on the chest during sleep paralysis. Your body is frozen, your breath shallow, your heart pounding. That fear is harvested, drawn out like lifeblood. To the entity, your panic is currency, each gasp of dread another coin deposited into the astral economy. It does not kill you outright because killing would end the flow. Instead, it milks you slowly, like a vein tapped eternally. This is not violence, but husbandry. You are cattle raised to bleed fear. Consider the false awakenings, each loop extracting a little more hope. You believe you have escaped, only to realize you remain imprisoned. That moment of shattered relief, the sinking despair that follows it is a transfusion of psychic blood. The system thrives not just on fear but on disappointment, on hope betrayed. Each false dawn is a vein opened invisibly, draining you of will. Even nightmares themselves are rituals of bleeding. You fall, you are hunted, you scream without sound. These are not random dreamscapes, but carefully crafted theaters of extraction. The astral architecture designs scenarios calibrated to maximize output. Fear of death, fear of loss, fear of helplessness all are syringes drawing blood from the psyche. Waking in a sweat, trembling, gasping, you carry the wound back into waking life, still leaking energy. Cultures have long preserved fragments of this truth. In Mesopotamian myth, Lameshtu fed on the terror of mothers. In medieval Europe, the incubus drained not flesh but vitality during sleep. The Aztecs believed the sun required the psychic blood of hearts torn out. These myths were not about gore alone. They were testimonies of a deeper economy, where the coin was not only crimson liquid, but the energy of human experience. Astral hell is simply the continuation of that economy in subtler form. Generational trauma becomes another vein in this system. Wars, genocides, slavery. Each collective wound bleeds into the astral, layering corridors with centuries of pain. The children of the afflicted inherit resonance, carrying despair like a bloodline. Their nightmares are not only their own, but echoes of ancestors. Astral Hell thrives on this intergenerational bleeding, sustaining itself across centuries without needing to strike anew. Even waking life echoes this economy. Media drenches us in horror, trauma, catastrophe, ensuring we bleed energy daily. Fear-based politics feed off panic. Market crashes feed off despair. Like the astral entities, these systems know that emotional blood is more sustainable than physical sacrifice. A battlefield eventually empties, but a fearful population bleeds endlessly. Yet the forbidden truth is more unsettling still. We offer our blood willingly. We replay painful memories, indulge despair, feed the loops of anxiety. Each repetition reopens the wound. Each obsession refreshes the flow. Astral Hell does not always need to attack. Often it waits, knowing we will bleed ourselves. Our unhealed grief is the vein it never needs to cut, and still, blood testifies. Every drop spilled, whether physical or psychic, is evidence. The system wants us to see it as debt, but in truth it is ledger. Fear does not only sustain Astral Hell, it also reveals its dependence. If despair is its food, then hope withheld becomes starvation. If guilt is its drink, then forgiveness dries the well. If fear is its currency, then courage bankrupts the economy. Blood, even as currency, holds the key to collapse. This is why forbidden traditions spoke of transmutation. The alchemist did not only seek to change lead into gold, but fear into clarity, grief into compassion. To transmute emotional blood is to deny the astral architecture its currency. You still bleed, but the blood is reclaimed, redirected into growth rather than captivity. Breath becomes coagulation, light becomes transfusion. What was once food for entities becomes fuel for awakening. The forbidden truth is this: Astral Hell survives because we bleed into it every night. But blood is not only weakness, it is also a weapon. It carries memory, power, and testimony. When spilled unconsciously, it sustains the prison. When transmuted consciously, it begins to dissolve the walls. The corridors are built from blood, but so too is the key that can unmake them. Every empire of control requires not only blood, but pacts agreements that bind. Contracts that define roles, covenants signed in silence. Astral Hell is no different. Its corridors are not merely built from fear. They are maintained by agreements we never remember making. These pacts are not written on parchment, nor spoken aloud in ritual. They are vibrational contracts, sealed through resonance, renewed through repetition, enforced through despair. The most insidious of these is the pact of fear. Every time you believe the shadow pressing on your chest has power over you, you sign. Every gasp of terror is a signature, every surrender to panic a clause fulfilled. The entities do not need to speak. Your own belief grants consent. The pact says, if you fear, you feed. And so long as you tremble, the contract renews itself endlessly. Then comes the pact of recognition. In false awakenings, you look around, accept the counterfeit reality, and by doing so, you agree. To mistake the illusion for truth is to reinforce the system's authority. Each time you say to yourself, I am awake now, you inscribe your name again in the astral ledger. This pact is not about obedience, but about perception. To believe the stage is real is to become its actor.
No.
The false awakening is not just a trap, but a contract. You agreed to play along. And by that agreement, the labyrinth sustains itself. There is also the pact of despair. When grief lingers, when trauma festers, when anger is replayed endlessly, you are paying installments into Astral Hell. The unresolved becomes standing contract, binding you to resonance long after the event is gone. The architecture thrives on this type of long-term leasing. Your wound is collateral, your despair the monthly payment. You did not choose this debt, but you service it unconsciously every time you relive the pain. Cultures have preserved fragments of these contracts in myth. The ancient Greeks spoke of Hades' pomegranate, one bite binding Persephone to the underworld for half the year. The Tibetans warned that spirits who accept food or drink in the bardo are tied to lower realms. Folktales speak of bargains struck with demons, always sealed not with ink but with acknowledgement. The lesson is clear. To accept is to bind. Even silence can be consent. In modern life, the same pacts appear under new names. The contract of labor demands endless repetition for survival, echoing the corridor of futility. The contract of debt enslaves through numbers, echoing the false awakening's loop. The contract of media consumption binds attention to fear, echoing the astral shadow pressing at night. Each system disguises contract as normalcy, but the mechanics are identical. You pay with energy, you bind with belief. Astral Hell enforces these contracts not through coercion but through trickery. It presents illusions and waits for recognition. It presses shadows and waits for fear, replays pain and waits for despair. You are never dragged into agreement. You walk in willingly, unaware you are signing. The genius of the system is that it never needs to force you. It only needs you to participate unconsciously. But forbidden knowledge whispers another truth. Contracts can be broken. In Gnostic traditions, the demiurge enslaved souls through false covenants. But the awakened refused to acknowledge his authority. In grimoires, pacts with demons were reversible if their names were spoken aloud and their terms exposed. The key was always awareness, naming the contract stripped it of power. Two in Astral Hell. When you recognize fear as bait, you withhold consent. When you see the false awakening as illusion, you refuse to play. When you name despair as wound rather than punishment, you stop paying installments. Each act of recognition is a breach. Each refusal, a torn page from the astral ledger. The forbidden truth is stark. You are not prisoner by chains, but by contracts of resonance. You were never forced to sign. You were tricked into it. But the moment you awaken to the terms, you can refuse. And when enough clauses are broken, the architecture itself begins to collapse, because the system has no power without your agreement. The most terrifying genius of Astral Hell is not its corridors, nor its contracts, but its morality, reversed, inverted, and weaponized. Here, suffering is not a wound to be healed, but a resource to be harvested. Fear is not a weakness, but a sacrament. Despair is not tragedy, but tithe. The inverted moral code is what keeps the prison self-sustaining. It convinces its prisoners that their agony is deserved, even sacred, while their attempts to heal are acts of rebellion. Consider the figure of the shadow on the chest. In many cultures, the paralysis demon is described as punishment for sins, or as a spiritual reckoning. The victim wakes crushed, unable to move, convinced they are being judged or tormented for moral failure. But in truth, the weight is not judgment, it is extraction. The system feeds on the terror, yet convinces the victim that they are guilty, that their suffering is their fault. This is inversion. To disguise harvesting as punishment, to make you thank your oppressor by calling it justice. False awakenings operate the same way. To awaken should mean freedom, clarity, escape. But in Astral Hell, each awakening is counterfeit, a deeper loop. The inverted code whispers, "You are too weak to leave. You chose this. You belong here." Awakening, the very symbol of liberation, becomes evidence of captivity. Hope is reframed as naivety, clarity as delusion. The system makes the soul doubt itself, ensuring that each attempt at freedom feels like failure. Each glimpse of light feels like mockery. The distorted faces are another glyph of inversion. In the waking world, a familiar face is comfort, love, trust. In Astral Hell, it is trap. See your mother, your lover, your child, but something is off, uncanny, wrong. Instead of reassurance, recognition becomes terror. The system inverts the most sacred bond, identity itself, into betrayal. You cannot trust what you love most, and in that betrayal, the architecture thrives. The greatest inversion, however, lies in the moral framing of pain itself. Astral Hell insists that suffering is punishment, that your nightmares are deserved, that your despair is karmic balance. The inverted moral code says, you bleed because you sinned, you fear because you are weak, you suffer because you are guilty. In this way, the prison not only extracts energy, but silences rebellion. If you believe you deserve captivity, you will never resist it. Yet the forbidden perspective reveals the opposite. Suffering here is not proof of guilt, but proof of theft. Pain is not a holy offering, but a harvested commodity. The more you despair, the more the system profits. To heal is not selfish rebellion, it is the only act of resistance. The inversion is exposed. What is called sin is survival. What is called virtue is submission. What is called rebellion is liberation. We see this inversion mirrored in history. Wars framed as peacekeeping, slavery justified as divine order, poverty branded as laziness, trauma dismissed as weakness. Systems thrive by convincing victims that their suffering is deserved. Astral hell is simply the occult mirror of the same pattern, projected into the astral plane with greater clarity. Even in ritual, inversion reigns. Sleep, the natural state of rest, becomes prison. Dreams meant to heal become nightmares that bleed. Light meant to guide flickers as deception. Every symbol flips its meaning until trust itself is poison. This is why astral hell feels so destabilizing. Not only are you trapped, but the very compass of meaning is broken. Up is down, healing is sin, agony is worship. But here lies the seed of awakening. For once you name the inversion, its spell weakens. When you recognize the shadow as parasite rather than judge, fear lessens. When you see false awakening as trick, the loop falters. When you understand distorted faces as symbols of betrayal rather than cosmic truth, the terror shifts into clarity. The inverted code survives only through blindness. Awareness is its undoing. The forbidden truth is this: astral hell is not eternal punishment, but stolen resource. Its moral code is counterfeit scripture, designed to keep you kneeling while you bleed. To invert the inversion is the act of rebellion. To see suffering as theft, healing as defiance, love as weapon, awareness as exorcism. Once the moral compass is flipped back, the corridors of astral hell lose their power. The prison reveals itself for what it is: a hollow system starving for consent. Rituals are the gears of every prison. They keep the machinery moving not through brute force, but through repetition gestures performed so often that they stop being questioned. Astral hell thrives not because it locks its victims in chains, but because it scripts them into endless ceremonies. Rites of despair repeated night after night, until suffering itself becomes liturgy. The first ritual is the nightmare loop. Its dream of falling, each chase through corridors, each silent scream is not random but rehearsed theater. These scenarios replay endlessly because they are ceremonies of extraction. The fall reenacts helplessness. The chase ritualizes fear. The silence of the scream sanctifies despair. You do not dream, you perform in a rite staged by the architecture itself. The system needs the ritual to harvest, and so it repeats the same play with infinite variations, casting you as unwilling priest offering terror as sacrifice. The second ritual is sleep paralysis. You lie in your bed, frozen, chest heavy, shadow looming. This too is ceremony. The paralysis is initiation. The pressure is consecration. The fear is offering. The shadow does not need to speak because the ritual speaks for it. Every gasp is chant. Every drop of sweat is libation. Every heartbeat is drumbeat. It is a mass performed in silence, and millions undergo it nightly, unaware they are participants in a global liturgy of fear. The third ritual is the false awakening. To awaken should mean liberation, but here it is a ritual of betrayal. Each loop is a repetition of hope betrayed, a ceremonial reminder that freedom is illusion. The ritual is recursive. You believe you escape, then discover you are still captive, then repeat. Each cycle deepens the trance. Each repetition binds the soul tighter. This is not accident, it is choreography. Astral hell turns even the act of waking into sacred theater of despair. But the rituals extend beyond sleep. In waking life, collective trauma becomes mass ceremony feeding the astral. Wars are blood sacraments on a continental scale. Genocides are grand liturgies of despair echoing across generations. Economic collapse, pandemics, catastrophes, all harvest oceans of fear. Grief and guilt, feeding the astral like incense rising from a burning world. These are not random tragedies, but rituals writ large, repeated throughout history because repetition itself is the offering. Even media plays its part. News cycles saturating us with violence, screens glowing with disasters, endless scrolls of tragedies. This too is ritual. The repetition of horror across billions of eyes creates resonance, a chant of despair echoing globally. Every headline is incantation, every broadcast a liturgy, every shared panic another sacrificial hymn. Astral Hell expands not only in dreams but through televisions, phones, and feeds, converting attention into ritualized despair. The genius of ritual is that it feels ordinary. Nightmares are dismissed as just dreams. Sleep paralysis is labeled biological glitch. Media cycles are called information. Wars are called history. Because the rituals feel mundane, no one sees them as ceremonies. Yet this is their strength. They bind precisely because they hide in plain sight. You do not rebel against what you do not recognize as control. Still, rituals can be inverted. Just as fear repeats despair, awareness can repeat liberation. Ancient mystics taught counter-rituals, breathing as chant of clarity, symbols drawn as keys, light visualized as weapon. To break the nightmare loop, one can recognize the pattern and refuse to perform. To break paralysis, one can shift fear into breath, turning terror into hymn of defiance. To break media liturgies, one can deny participation, starving the ritual of attention. Every refusal is counter-ceremony, every act of awareness a reversed liturgy. The forbidden truth is this: Astral Hell survives because its rituals are performed unconsciously. Every night, every generation, every broadcast. Humanity has become its priesthood, offering despair without knowing. But ritual is a double-edged blade. Same repetition that enslaves can liberate if redirected. Fear can be chant, but so can courage. Silence can be paralysis, but so can meditation. Light can be counterfeit, but so can revelation. The architecture cannot survive without ritual, and once you reclaim ritual, the prison begins to crumble. Awakening to Astral Hell is unlike any other revelation. It does not arrive as triumph or salvation, but as a shock. The realization that you are not only the prisoner of the labyrinth, but one of its builders. The corridors, the shadows, the false dawns are not imposed from outside. They are stitched from your despair. Layered with the grief of generations, hardened into architecture by repetition. To awaken is to see the prison for what it is, and to accept the unbearable truth that you have been feeding it all along. The first stage of awakening is recognition of resonance. Fear is not random. Despair is not meaningless. Every vibration is contract. Every repetition of trauma is currency. To awaken is to realize that when the shadow presses on your chest, it is not punishing you, it is feeding.
Ow, you're terrible.
Is its feast. Recognition reframes suffering, not guilt, but theft. Not punishment, but parasitism. The moment you stop interpreting agony as deserved, the architecture cracks. The second stage is seeing the loops. False awakenings are not failures of consciousness, but rituals of extraction. Each time you awaken into a counterfeit world, you sign again. But to notice the loop is to break it. The instant you say this is not real, the ritual falters. Many mystics across culture spoke of this moment. In the Tibetan Bardo, recognition of illusions transforms them. In Gnostic tradition, realizing the Demiurge's false world is the first step toward escaping it. In Astral Hell, awareness interrupts the script, and the loop cannot continue once the actor refuses to play. The third stage is inverting the inversion. The system thrives by calling fear holy, despair sacred, pain deserved. Awakening is the rebellion of naming things correctly. Fear is harvest, despair is theft, pain is evidence of captivity. To see inversion for what it is to disarm it. You no longer bleed willingly. You no longer kneel in shame. You stand, even trembling, and whisper the forbidden counter-creed. This is not judgment. This is exploitation. In that naming, the spell unravels. The fourth stage is reclaiming ritual. You cannot escape ritual. You can only redirect it. Every nightmare is ceremony, but you can create counter-ceremony. Breath becomes liturgy of clarity. Light visualized becomes sigil of defiance. Silence becomes meditation rather than paralysis. Even in waking life, you can refuse rituals of despair, turning away from endless cycles of horror, refusing to repeat the chants of fear. Ritual does not vanish, shifts. The system starves not when ritual ends, but when ritual is reclaimed as weapon of awareness. The final stage is collective recognition. Astral Hell is not your private nightmare, it is humanity's shared construction. Every trauma, Every atrocity, every unhealed wound adds to its walls. To awaken individually is powerful, but to awaken collectively is apocalyptic. Imagine millions recognizing their nightmares as contracts, their fears as harvest, their despair as theft. Imagine entire populations refusing to bleed, refusing to repeat, refusing to kneel. Astral Hell would collapse under the weight of its own starvation. The apocalypses would arrive not as fire from heaven, but as unveiling of what has always been hidden, that the prison was built from us and can be unbuilt by us. This awakening is terrifying because it strips away the comfort of victimhood, demands responsibility. You are not only trapped, you're a participant. But it is liberating because it gives you power. What you created, you can uncreate. The corridors are vast, the shadows ancient, the rituals endless. It all depend on one thing, your consent, and consent can be withdrawn. The forbidden truth is this: Astral Hell is not eternal. It is parasitic, and all parasites die when the host awakens. To awaken is to remember you were never meant to bleed endlessly, never meant to wander corridors forever. You were meant to see, to name, to refuse. Once you do, the prison shakes. Once enough awaken, the prison falls. Apocalypse is not the end of the world, is the end of illusion. If Astral Hell is a prison raised from our pain, then every nightmare is a brick and every fear a chain. But what we built, we can unbuild. In the next descent, we enter a darker throne room, the Fire King's sovereigns, crowned in flame. Subscribe, and continue the unveiling.